Welcome to another lecture on love in the 20th century. I should be more precise and say that this time we'll look at the 20th century in comparison with the 4th century. Let me explain. C.S. Lewis on love. I've titled today's lecture Vulnerable Love, but it might as well be called C.S. Lewis's famous disagreement with St. Augustine on love. Famous because it is so rare. If you recognize this painting, you recognize that it's St. Augustine crying in the Garden of Milan. Why is he crying? He's crying because he's just had a conversion experience. But in his book, The Confessions, he cries several times for other reasons. And this pertains very closely to our theme today, which is the vulnerability of love. A couple of warm-up questions. First, what do you know about Augustine? Refresh your memory. One of the towering intellects of the past 2 millennia. What is his book, The Confessions, about? Why is it called Confessions? Have you perhaps read it? If not, I can warmly recommend it. It's the first of its kind in the genre of spiritual autobiography, which is also surprised by joy. If you have finished reading The Four Loves or reread it, or happen to know about this disagreement between C.S. Lewis and Augustine, again, refresh your memory. What was Lewis's disagreement with Augustine about precisely? And finally, read through Lewis's poem Scazons, which I link in the description. It's in the handout. So if you haven't read it yet, press pause now and read through it. How would you interpret Scazons? Now, I believe that although Augustine is not mentioned in that poem, the poem suggests an implicit and a dramatic dialogue with Augustine on love. I don't think Lewis was thinking about Augustine, but the disagreement that he had with Augustine on an important point concerning love is implicit in this illustrative poem. The 5 stanzas of the poem provide the literary backdrop for a more systematic analysis of their different positions. C.S. Lewis, who was an Irishman, spent most of his life commuting between Belfast and Oxford, and later between Oxford and Cambridge. And he only left the British Isles 3 times in his life, I believe. Twice he was in France and once in Greece. Except for 5 years spent in Italy, Augustine Aurelius, born in 354 and died in 430, the Numidian-born bishop of the city of Hippo, never left Northern Africa. Immobility and deep-rootedness helped both of these men to form very meaningful friendships and embrace a life of intellectual endeavor. C.S. Lewis paid Augustine the compliment of reading much of his writings. For obvious reasons, this compliment was never returned. In his religious thinking, and especially on love, Lewis is greatly indebted to Augustine, and he doesn't hide his admiration. In The Four Loves, Lewis says that Augustine is a great saint and a great thinker to whom my own glad debts are incalculable. And so the only time he disagrees with Augustine openly, publicly, on love, he does so, he explains, with trembling. And Lewis's sentiments for having to disagree with Augustine are similar to Stanley Hauerwas, the theologian's sentiments for having to disagree with Lewis. It is not easy, Hauerwas confesses in his article, to criticize a writer who has done so much good as C.S. Lewis. Hauerwas was a Christian pacifist, and Lewis was, well, just a Christian. Today, I'd like to evaluate this engagement or showdown between Lewis and Augustine. What precisely was the disagreement? Why is it important? And finally, was it really a disagreement, or was it perhaps a misunderstanding? C.S. Lewis was married, but he had no children of his own. St. Augustine was not married, but he somehow managed to procreate. In one way or another, both men thought much about marriage and fatherhood, about love between the sexes and love between the generations. They also thought and wrote much about love between friends, the love of friendship, the virtue of philia or amicita. Lewis's poem Scazons or Scazons opens with a contemplative stanza on the painful memory of lost friends. The problem of pain also tried to make sense of suffering, including the death of loved ones in a world supposedly created by a good God. And A Grief Observed traces this cataract of emotions that Lewis felt when he lost his best friend, namely his wife Joy, to cancer. I must show something that I received in the mail just a couple of days ago. A Grief Observed by N.W. Clerk. Some of you may know that A Grief Observed was published under a pseudonym because Lewis was at the height of his popularity and fame in the 1960s. And yet, what he says in this book might shock some of his fans because it's very raw in its disappointment in God. He gets over it, of course, but he still wanted to write it under a pseudonym. And I received this as a gift a couple of days ago from a dear friend who wrote the book, not that one, this one, Tolkien's Modern Reading, Holly Ordway. I had the privilege of reading it in draft. But moving on. Another theologian, or perhaps he's better described as a philosopher, Nicholas Wolterstorff, describes the difference between the problem of pain and a grief observed thus. The problem of pain is a sustained Christian account of suffering. For those who want to know how Lewis thought suffering fits into a Christian understanding of reality, this is the basic text. A grief observed is an expression of suffering, a cry of grief over the death of his wife, Joy, from cancer. So, whereas the problem of pain perhaps looks at suffering, a grief observed looks along suffering. I have an upcoming lecture on the problem of pain and evil specifically, so watch this space. But today we're not quite there yet. We're only talking about vulnerability. Returning to the Four Loves. The Four Loves devotes an entire chapter on philia. It is this chapter on friendship where Lewis, with trembling, shares his concern about Augustine's reaction to the loss of Augustine's friend. Augustine, you see, also experienced tragic loss. And as I mentioned, his spiritual autobiography, Confessions, mentions several stories that involve tears. For example, we read of an unnamed friend whose death devastated Augustine. And in the Four Loves, Lewis comments, In words which can still bring tears to the eyes, Augustine describes the desolation in which the death of his friend Nebridius plunged him. Then he draws a moral. This is what comes, he says, of giving one's heart to anything but God. In words which can still bring tears to the eyes. I don't think that's a coincidence. Lewis is deliberately using the words tears and unashamedly. That is part of the disagreement here. Well, by the time in the Confessions we reach Augustine's mother Monica's death, Augustine is trying really hard to fight back his tears. And although Lewis is touched by many of the depictions of grief in the Confessions, Lewis is also a bit uneasy and even alarmed. He writes that this is probably less a part of Augustine's Christendom than a hangover from the high-minded pagan philosophies in which he grew up. It is closer to Stoic apathy or Neoplatonic mysticism than to charity, so than to agape. And the moral that Lewis believes that Augustine drew from this is what comes of giving your heart to anything but God, Lewis firmly rejects. And we'll look at that in a moment. The second and the third stanzas of the poem help us understand Lewis's objection here. These stanzas record two disillusionments, which is another way of saying that the poet was under the spell of two illusions, two false beliefs. The first false belief or illusion from which the poet snaps out is biographical or personal, and the second is more religious. The first is recorded in the second stanza, where the poet speaks of the little spear that stabs. The pain accompanied with the memory of the lost friend, the lost individual, particular friend, local friend, reveals that the poet's love was supposedly immature. The particular love to particular people that he felt hadn't yet developed into universal love as he thought it ought to have. And pain, grief, the tears shatters this illusion that this transmutation from particular love into universal love, love of all humankind, had been accomplished. It had obviously not. The realization here is immediately followed by a second, more profound realization, which is recorded in the third stanza. If the first mistake was thinking that the transmutation from particular loves to universal loves wasn't complete, the second mistake was thinking that such a transmutational goal was a goal in the first place, was the ideal that you should strive for, that supposedly mature love must leave behind, transmute our local particular loves and be replaced by a more authentic love, love universal, as the poem puts it. But the tears, the stab, have given the poet a new understanding of love. Humans are not angels, who, according to the poem, have no favorites, angelic indifferences. Angels love universally with no bar. And no bar here means obviously no limits, not that angels need alcohol to feel lovey-dovey. But thou gavest man the tether and pang of the particular. What does this mean? Well, I think the answer is this. It means the general human ability and disposition to feel particular losses, tears, stabs, and a deeper understanding of this ability and disposition, and perhaps even an embracing of it. And I say embracing because, after all, the poet calls it a gift thou gavest. Thou, Lord, surely knewest thine own plan. Local and particular loves are part of God's plan, his good plan for humanity. They're not a sign of imperfect or immature love. This is the realization. This is what the poet had learned and snapped out of a false understanding of love. In the Chronicles of Narnia, the last book called The Last Battle, we are told that it is right for one of the characters, Lucy, to weep for the death of Narnia, which is another way of saying that it's sometimes wrong not to weep. Not only that is weeping okay, but sometimes weeping is more than okay. But isn't true Christian love supposed to be universal? Isn't love of all humanity still kind of the ultimate goal? Well, yes, but particular and universal loves aren't contradictory. They're not mutually exclusive. And here, it's important and helpful to understand the difference between transmutation and transposition. Transmutation means the changing of one thing into another, or to emphasize the point, the destruction of one thing into another. Transposition, on the other hand, means perfecting something without destroying it. And an example would be that human loves are not destroyed to make room for a supposedly higher divine love. Rather, this divine love perfects the human loves, doesn't destroy them. In the Four Loves, Lewis writes, divine love does not substitute itself for the natural, as if we had to throw away our silver to make room for the gold. The natural loves are summoned to become modes of charity, while also remaining the natural loves they are. So, according to Lewis, God transposes human loves into higher love without destroying them in the process. And we're talking about good loves, not unlawful loves, which might require total rejection or renunciation. One of Lewis's favorite maxims is this one from Thomas Kempis's book, The Imitation of Christ. The highest does not stand without the lowest, which he repeats over and over again in the intro and later on in the following chapters. The highest does not stand without the lowest. The highest cannot stand without the lowest. Particular loves we feel for this person and that person and that person in our lives, they don't need to be destroyed for universal love to take hold. In fact, particular loves cannot, should not be destroyed if universal love is ever to take hold, because universal love depends on these particular loves. The highest does not stand without the lowest. Humans are not angels, we learned. This point is raised in the fourth stanza. The poet calls the wounding gift of particular love a chemic drop, a mere drop, but enough to constitute a dramatic difference between angelic nature and human nature, or spirit and soul. What could potentially be discarnate spirituality, the spirit without a body, is changed into another kind of being, an embodied human soul. Spirit's sweet water is turned into a stringent soul. There's two ways to read this, I think. The first would be that this is a poetic dramatization of God's original creative act. The second, and I lean towards the second interpretation, is that this describes the process of our realization of what it means to be a human person, a vulnerable human person. And no doubt this process of self-realization, deeper self-understanding is set in motion sometimes by stabs, pangs of the particular, by particular losses in our lives, and a closer meditation on the message that these losses convey. As the word astringent appears very rarely in Snapchat discussions and TikTok, a short definition is in order. The general definition of astringent would be harsh, and synonyms would be biting and bitter. Antonyms would be bland or mild. So the human soul, one might say, is the bitter or the bittersweet intensification of spirit. Even deep griefs are a rightful expression of human nature. And with this, we return to the disagreement with Augustine. The reference here to Augustine's high-minded hangover, I love that metaphor, from Neoplatonic mysticism is especially relevant here. Augustine has been called the father of the so-called Order of Love's tradition, Ordo Amoris or Ordo Caritatis, according to which everything in the universe is in a hierarchical order with God on top and lesser beings still valuable, but lesser beings gradually following. And what you want to do is get your order of loves correct. Get your loves in order. Love higher things first and secondary things second, but love everything appropriately. In its Christian version, this tradition of the order of loves heavenly Christianizes or baptizes the understanding of love that we find in Plato's Symposium. And in the four loves, in the allegory of love, Lewis describes the Plato's Symposium and says that in it we find the idea of a ladder whereby the soul may ascend from human love to divine love. So from human love, which is material and particular, gradually to divine love, which is more spiritual and universal. But, Lewis says, this is a ladder in the strictest sense. You reach the higher rings by leaving the lower ones behind. And Lewis rejects this kind of worldview. He says, I am inclined to distrust that kind of respect for the spiritual order which bases itself on contempt for the natural order, for lower things. Again, the highest cannot stand without the lowest. Lewis suspected, I should say, that in this stage of his life, Augustine's Platonic and Stoic Christianity had perhaps not shaken off all of its non-Christian dust yet. And Augustine would continue to develop his thinking for a good 3 decades afterwards. Lewis would agree with Augustine that the real problem is that our loves are inordinate. They are not in order. But he rejects Augustine's supposed solution to the problem as expressed in this book, The Confessions. Let's look at that a little more closely. In one way, the moral that Augustine drew, or what Lewis thought he drew, all beings pass away, so do not let your happiness depend on something you may lose, makes excellent sense. Don't put all your goods in the leaky vessel. Don't rent a damp basement apartment. Don't trust the pavement companies in Northern Ontario. Be careful out there. As a safety first person, this made a strong appeal to Lewis's temperament, but not to his conscience, as he explains in The Four Loves. When I respond to that appeal, I seem to myself to be 1,000 miles away from Christ. If I am sure of anything, I am sure that his teaching was never meant to confirm my congenital preference for safe investments and limited liabilities. We are created in an image of God who is love. And to love is to be vulnerable. And thus, vulnerability that comes from loving particular people because they hurt and they eventually die. Vulnerability belongs to the proper nature of love. And this realization is recorded in the last stanza of the poem. Since humans are created in the image of the Creator, embracing our full nature implies embracing our divine calling as well. The poet says, "Gods we are, thou hadst said." The distinction, the difference here between the Creator and the creature is not entirely abolished. But we, however small, we somehow still participate inwardly in God's love. Human love shares essentially God's love. As Lewis says in some of his letters, that human love essentially has the dawn of agape, has the dawn of divine love. And again, with this, he is in direct opposition to his contemporary Anders Nygren's ideas and the understanding of love that he popularized, according to which humans are tubes or channels of divine love. We do nothing. God's love just flows through us. Lewis rejects this kind of one-way road, the total denial of any positive human agency in love. The poet likens angelic existence to the moon, lunar angels. The moon's light is borrowed light, it's secondary, it's reflected from the sun. And by the time it reaches our face, it's lost all its warmth. Human existence is also secondary in this sense, and this applies to human loves as well. But the poet isn't satisfied because he says we're called to quiver with fire itself, which means vibrate inwardly, not just reflect cold flame like the moon does. Human nature is blessed if we can take it with a native luminosity. This light is a gift, and yet somehow when it is truly given, it's truly ours. If we can take it. Because this gift can prove intolerable for some. Why? Well, because to love is to be vulnerable. We pay dearly, are the last words. There's no escape from love along the lines Augustine suggested. There's no escape from love whatsoever. Love is always followed by hurt. And hurt is a kind of double invitation, either to love again or to not. It's like smoke from a dying fire that is intolerably suffocating and stings your eyes. And you can either clear out the air and rekindle the flame, That's one way to get rid of the smoke. Or you put out the fire for good. Those are your two options. Let me quote from the Four Loves. If you want to make sure of keeping your heart intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from the dangers and perturbations of love is hell. Those were some of the more memorable lines from the Four Loves. But what about Lewis's own memory? Because you may have already noticed this, that Lewis mistakenly refers to Augustine's unnamed friend as Nebridius. No, Nebridius dies a few chapters later. This friend is never named in the book. Could it be possible that since Lewis misremembers the name of the person, that he may have also misunderstood Augustine's subtle point here? I think it is possible that Augustine might be saying something else. A case in point is the death of Augustine's mother, Monica. The context, the audience that Augustine is writing at the time, is a pretty ascetic readership. He belonged to an order of monks. They would sometimes go barefoot, even in cold weather. They had this prejudice against crying and tears, stoic prejudice against emotion. And Augustine is coming out of this philosophy. Lewis says that he's still hung over a little bit, but he is recovering after he found his Christianity. A case in point here is the death of Augustine's mother, Monica. You may recall that by the time we reach the death of his mother, Augustine is trying really hard not to cry. Eventually, though, the grief wells up in him and he succumbs to tears. And he writes, "Now I let flow the tears which I had held back, so that they ran as freely as they wished," he says, and then he offers his confession. "My heart rested upon them," his tears, "and it reclined upon them because it was your ears that were there, speaking to God, not those of some human critic who would put a proud interpretation on my weeping. And now, Lord, I make my confession to you in writing. Let anyone who wishes read and interpret as he pleases. If he finds fault that I wept for my mother for a fraction of an hour, the mother who had died before my eyes, who had wept for me that I might live before your eyes, let him not mock me, but rather, if a person of much charity, let him weep himself before you for my sins." Perhaps you can feel the tension here in Augustine between what, on one hand, he had learned from the Greek philosophies about the innobility of crying, and on the other, his newfound Christian understanding of vulnerability being essential to the very nature of love. What is he trying to say there? Is he actually trying to teach his readership to understand love anew? Did Lewis understand Augustine or misunderstand him? Well, read the Confessions and decide for yourself. If Lewis misunderstood Augustine, he owes Augustine a heavenly apology. And who knows, as proof of true forgiveness, Augustine might whip out a well read copy of Lewis's poem Scazons, peppered with celestial smileys and ecclesiastic exclamation marks, with only a few minor strokes of the red pen. And then Lewis's compliment would be returned, Augustine reading Lewis's work back to him. I wonder if you found the fallacy, the potential fallacy that possibly was committed somewhere. Where was it? And which one was it? I leave you with this thought. To love is to be vulnerable. Is this true? And in what sense precisely? Why is it true?